a smooth process. I know we haven't had the Zoom world has given us the opportunity to have more open board meetings than previously. And so this is a first time for all of us and our first board meeting of 2021. So we'll see how it goes. Referring back to the agenda, now that I've called the meeting to order, we have a motion to consider. So I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. Let me get this up. I think that's going to do it. And if I share my screen, the board should see a motion. We had an emergency session of the board as it's defined in the bylaws on February 19th, telephonically as permitted. And the purpose was to consider a motion to appeal the City of Lake Oswego's tentative staff decision approving removal of trees on 820 North State Street. And the board resolved to file the appeal, but also to review this decision at its next regularly scheduled board meeting, which is this one. And at that time, vote to continue with or withdraw the appeal. So we need a motion to approve the minutes of February 19th, and I so move. If I could get a second from one of the board members.
I'll second it.
Okay, and any opposed? No, so the three of us being present, the motion carries. And I'll get with you later we want to send the minutes into the city, obviously, to document that. Our next agenda item is an update on emergency preparedness. And we also have our guest presenter and board member from last year. And I actually don't know, many years before, I'm not sure, but Cassie Clark has joined us, and I'll let Andy introduce her in the presentation, and I will stop sharing so Cassie can hopefully share at the start of her presentation.
Well, while Cassie's bringing the presentation up, I'll just say that, Cassie has a lot of background in this, and I got involved later on, and I've learned a lot from Cassie. She's been very busy with the state COVID testing program, and so I've tried to support her in every way I can. But we've been a team. She's got the talent and I've got the time, and between us, we're trying to get this done. So Cassie's going to do the introduction, and then somewhere along the way, I'll pick it up. Cassie.
Thanks, Andy. So hi, everyone. I think I know most of you, or at least from our last time we were together. So I'm Cassie Clark, and I live on Bryant at Lakeview. And I will just kind of go ahead and get started on this, and then kind of fill in some of the details. At least I think I can. Let's see if I can. Hold on. Doesn't seem to be advancing for me. Oh, there we go. So as Andy and Alan alluded to, I've been kind of working on this with the Bryant Neighborhood Board for a few years. I was in a CERT class several years ago and reached out to the previous board chair before Nancy Dunas, who was pretty much transitioning off at the time, and she was pretty much a one-woman show. And so there was not a committee focused on preparedness at the time. And so since I was newly out of CERT and have a background in emergency preparedness, specifically with rural critical access hospitals, that I, had just a kind of personal interest to help our neighbors get prepared. And so asked if I could start a committee then, and that is when she was rolling off, and that's when we got a brand new board on that included Nancy Dunas and then Ann Savage as well, who I think I just saw on here as well. So Ann and I kind of joined forces and were the Prep LO liaison for our Bryant Neighborhood Board. And we tried to do some meetings with our community, and had some immediate interest, but ultimately everybody's schedules are so busy, and it just became challenging for us to get together. So we did write a grant and received preparedness funds through the neighborhood enhancement planning or preparedness. I can't remember what the NEP stands for, but it's through LO. And so we were able to receive some emergency preparedness supplies. And at the time, Anne kind of rolled off of preparedness work and was working on tree work. And so that's when Andy and I connected. And Andy has really been leading this effort. I think he's a little too gracious with what I've been doing, but together we are going to continue this work. And so we conducted an emergency preparedness survey in 2020, June 2020, and we're able to kind of reinvigorate this process and have started meeting with some team captains. And so just to remind us all, these are our basic goals that we have, which I mean can be revisited as well, but it's ultimately to create an emergency response network throughout our neighborhood, where we're hoping to recruit team leads for each cohort or neighborhood street, so that we are able to respond in the event of a disaster. And I think this year's winter storm is a perfect example of how this neighborhood network could help our neighbors, understanding who might need additional help, those neighbors that may be homebound or need additional assistance, such as medications or other things, and how we could get them cared for during this time period. And ultimately, with Prep LO's involvement and our liaison with that group that has stalled at the moment, Prep LO is really focused on a catastrophic earthquake. And I mean, I think preparing for that is wonderful, but ultimately you can see that we were pretty crippled by this winter storm, which is something that I think we can experience probably on an annual basis, especially going forward. So just having, basic preparedness. And so I think our main goal, though, is to make sure that our individual houses are prepared, and that they have, they have this idea of 2 weeks ready. I think we used to say that they needed a 72-hour pack, and that's now increased to 2 weeks. And now ultimately, if you talk to real preparedness folks, they're really saying it's a month before you're really going to get any resources. And if you can see from this latest event, some of us were really without power and supplies for about 10 days. And so that's just a winter event. So I think it is good for our community to continue to promote the fact that we just need to be individually prepared ourselves and know what to do if our power is out, or how to get safe water, learning from Texas if we can. And so we have this idea of using team captains to bring our neighbors together to help us share this common goal, so that we can be prepared for an emergency event. So progress to date, we have, like I said, completed that survey. I think maybe this date might be wrong, or maybe I was wrong earlier, so we can check on that. It feels like it hasn't been that long, but maybe it has. And then we have worked on, with the information from that survey, Andy has done a great job connecting with individuals who have expressed interest to be part of this committee. I think we're still hoping to build that committee and really try to engage people on an individual level so that we can have some dedicated resources for our community. But we have 8 very engaged and enthused individuals that have volunteered to be team captains and do some additional recruitment for us. We've had 2 emergency preparedness committee meetings, including and an additional briefing with Dave Smith, who is our LOFD deputy fire marshal, to talk about some emergency planning and some plans that the city has. And then we've coordinated and established, so our committee, I'm sorry, Andy, that's your last bullet. So I'm going to let you kind of chime in on that one and then start over again for us on the next slide, if you will.
Okay. Well, thanks, Cassie. Yeah, we've had some coordination. There's other neighborhood associations that have committees that are quite active, and so we're taking advantage of their progress they've made, especially Lake Forest and Palisades. And so we're not alone in this, and we're hoping to continue to do that as a resource sharing and information sharing effort. But the main thing that we're going to do, our next steps, number one is this program called Map Your Neighborhood, which is trying to get, we've reached out to the entire Bryant neighborhood area, but now we want to bring it down to the immediate neighborhood, to the down to the block level, where you know your neighbor and you want to reach them with information about how to be prepared, and then getting their contact information. So in the case of an emergency, you know how to contact them, they know how to contact you to be in in control. And obviously in the last storm, it was an issue of not knowing who was where and what they needed and how to contact them. So this is a major part of the effort. We also want to solicit them in ongoing emergency preparedness programs. So that's part of this outreach to get them as involved as possible down at a block level. And that's where the team captains really have their work cut out for them, because we have to now get out on the street and meet with people. And so to do that is twofold. One, we're going to develop and distribute a flyer, an information piece with all the emergency prep info on it, as well as a survey, sort of an information form that will solicit their feedback about how prepared they are and who they are. And so we'll have sort of a database down at the block level, at the immediate neighborhood level. I'll mention here that there's a lot of information is at Prep LO, and if you're not familiar with Prep LO or you haven't looked at it, there's a lot there that anybody can take advantage of. So we'll be referencing that. And then there's some booklets, in particular, one that we want to share. It's both online and as a handout called On Shaky Ground, about earthquake preparedness. And that's really, as Cassie said, the main mission of Prep LO and of the emergency committees was focused on major disasters like an earthquake. But I think, as we've seen from the recent fires and the storm, we need to focus more near-term and immediate needs on the less disastrous emergencies. So we're trying to balance those things. To get out to the neighborhoods, we're establishing different zones. The team captains will be responsible for perhaps a half a dozen or so zones around the neighborhood, and within those zones, they'll then find their recruitments to go into the block level to distribute this information. One of the key things in this is finding places during a disaster where people can meet and where we can husband our resources, have meeting points and places to gather and get the emergency equipment. The fire station on Jean Road is one of those spots, but we're also looking at the new junior high school. It's earthquake resilient, and I think it's ideally set up for us to use as a resource, but they're still in construction. The pandemic and everything else has delayed us in trying to really connect with them, but as soon as possible, we're going to see how we can use that as a key resource for our neighborhood to use in the case of any kind of emergency. We also have, I don't know, I hope that you know about the CERTs, this emergency response trainee program, the emergency response team trainees. It's a program that's overseen by the fire department, that for first responders in the neighborhood. And I think we've got several. We've got about 3 of us on our committee that are CERT trained. And we think that there's probably, actually, Ann, you're here too. So there's 4 of us, because we've got Bill. But we're reaching out to find other CERT trainees in the area, as well as medical and EMT personnel. There's a lot of them just scattered through the neighborhood that have emergency responder capabilities, and we want to know who they are, where they are, and what they are be ready to do in case of an emergency. So that's part of this information gathering process. The other major program that is critical is a communication strategy. As you saw during the most recent storm, a lot of people lost internet, and cell phones were disrupted. It was very difficult to communicate. In the case of a major disaster, we can expect everything to go down, and portable radio and ham radio communication is about the only viable way to reach other people. Bill might chime in later about his experience or any key points to make in this, but he was about the only one that through his ham radio group, LO Aries, who was in touch and could really serve as a focal point for information. But we've still got a long way to go to get those people that have that radio capability and connect with other neighbors. Dave Kainoa out of the Lake Forest area and David Smith worked together with a team trying to develop a strategy for the use of these radios, but there's a lot of issues around that right now. And so we're a bit delayed on that. We have equipment, but there's some other issues that delayed us being able to put that in use. But that's a key part of what we're trying to do so that we can communicate in the case everything goes down. We'll have the communications capability. The next thing that we're looking at, so you go to the next slide here. Let's see, do we have? Yeah, in regard to the most recent storm, I think one of the key issues that we need to address is how much are we focused on these major disasters that take down infrastructure for, as Cassie said, up to a month or so, cut out all communications in which there's a life-threatening emergencies and medical aid is needed, versus the more common emergencies, the fire, the storm, the windstorms, ice, whatever, that are not as disastrous, but happen often. And I think there's a need for assistance. I was just reading about people that have portable oxygen, for example, and when power goes down, they need power. And one of the lessons learned in the ice storm is that we all should have generators if we can get them, and they're really critical to have power for critical needs. We have a document, I don't know if we're going to share it here, and I don't know how many people have seen it, but it's the lessons learned, the review of the ice storm, and several people share their experience in coping with the recent disaster with their own emergency equipment, whether it's wood burning stoves or generators or portable radios. But in any case, there's a lot of neighborhood level resources out there that we want to be able to bring to bear on this, as well as communication pieces. The BNA has a Facebook page that can certainly provide links to new emergency information and links to meetings or critical information that is out there. And so we want to take advantage of that to whatever extent is possible, as well as Nextdoor and this Facebook group called Buy Nothing. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you go and look at it, although it's primarily a way for, it's called Lake Oswego Buy Nothing is the local one, but it's a national group. And it usually is just people sharing things that they might not need and want to share with their neighbors. But in the case of the most recent storm, there's a person-to-person emergency resource network nationally that comes down to Buy Nothing, that group, and they mobilized here in the Lake Oswego area and provided meals and communication and warmth and just a lot of things. I think Leah is not online now, but she had shared a lot of that information with us, and we hope to be able to use that if we have another situation like this. It's a great local resource along with these other ones, if communications are still in place. One of the other things we learned from the ice storm was about trees, or how critical they were, and maybe this is a good segue into the next agenda item, but the trees were part of the disaster, unfortunately, and I think people are taking a really hard look at what has to be done in terms of tree maintenance. So a lot is done, but obviously not enough, and that's what really created the disaster this past month. And so I'll just leave that at that. What we're really looking for, and the reason we wanted to make this presentation and talk to everybody, is we want board member support and neighborhood support and just outreach, and we want your feedback at this stage, especially as we're finally bringing the plans together. So please comment, ask questions, do whatever you can. And we'll also talk maybe later, Alan mentioned about a neighborhood grant that allows us to underwrite some of these programs that we're doing. So that's basically it. If you need to communicate with either of us, these are our email addresses. Thank you very much for attending, and hope to be able to talk to you a lot in the coming time.
Great. Well, thank you, Andy and Cassie. From a board perspective, is there anything? Okay, we have the NEP program issue we can come back to at the end of the meeting. Anything else? Is there a specific PrepLO subcommittee of the Bryant Neighborhood Association, or is that kind of a standalone organization? I guess I'm not sure of the history.
Yeah, that's citywide. That's
Citywide.
yeah. It's a support organization available and support, for information that all the different neighborhoods draw on.
Is there a need to have one that is neighborhood association specific, or do other neighborhoods have that, or is that just duplicative?
That's basically what we are. Yeah.
So we're trying to be, so we are the liaisons to that
Yeah.
PrepLO group, and that PrepLO was
Oh,
started to
Right.
join all of these neighborhood associations together to have a monthly meeting. And so, there was at least one representative, hopefully, but others are able to participate. It's open to anybody. But they have they had their first meeting via Zoom this past week, I think it was, Andy and Bill, I can't remember exactly, but
Yeah.
they have not been meeting since COVID started. So it's been a full year since they have had their monthly meeting.
So we do have a committee. It's you and Andy.
No, not just us, because now we've recruited some fresh faces with some.
Oh, good. So,
That's what the team captains are. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but anybody, again, anybody I think is welcome to build this committee, and hopefully we will build it to be more robust. I think if you saw that map when the first slide, we do have about 800-ish homes in our neighborhood. Y'all might know better than I. And so
that's the number right here. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if we're really going to do an effective map your neighborhood job, which is really to kind of identify where those gas lines are, where the water lines are, which would be helpful in an ice storm, right? To know, like, if you're out of town, your neighbor can go and kind of shut your water off for you. So kind of it really to get at that granular level of being prepared on a street by street level. The idea is to have 10 to 20 homes assigned to a group at one time, so that is really kind of your cohort. And so if you break that down, that's how many people we would really need to have engaged to do a really effective job for our entire neighborhood. I do feel that it is really, our neighborhood is situated a little uniquely, that we have the fire department right at in our neighborhood, which is, I believe, I don't know how they rank their fire departments, but I believe it does have some more robust rig at that station. But then also its proximity to our school, which is clearly designed to withstand an earthquake. We'll see if that really happens. Hopefully we don't have to see that in our lifetime, but that's the idea. And then with that large field next to it, which is one of my son's papers that he's writing this term, is to see how we could turn that field into a field hospital potentially, because I think ultimately if we really do have Cascadia happen, all the roads to our neighborhood will be down for a long time. And so how would we get emergency care into our community, and how would we get supplies? And clearly that would need to be like FEMA dropped in. And so how would we coordinate that just with our proximity? So I think it's just a fun idea to kind of play with and kind of explore, and hopefully we'd never need it, but ultimately we would like to focus on each individual house being prepared, so that we don't need to rely on our certs to go door to door to make sure everybody's safe and has what they need. But a lot of people don't want to, aren't prepared. I know even I wasn't prepared this last winter storm, for my stuff wasn't charged. So it's no good to have a bunch of supplies if they're not plugged in and ready to go. So anyway, I think we all need this reminder of how to be better prepared. But ultimately we would have this, house by house effort, and then a collective network of folks to be able to participate in case we do need a higher level of care. And that's where our certs could come in, and Bill's group with how we would be able to relay this information, not only within our own group communication wise, but then externally, and how we could get those resources into our community in a time of need.
I know it was an eye opener for me, and I know I wasn't alone, because I heard about it that my Verizon cell phone failed. As long as the power was out, the cell phone didn't work either, which isn't intuitively the way it's supposed to work. So, but that was, we were basically cut off unless we could drive out to somewhere. But what if, for the first day, we weren't able to drive out either. So, so that was kind of an eye opener that you always assume you have one or the other, and that's not necessarily the case. At least maybe Verizon has a cell tower that's plugged in somewhere. I don't know, but that was pretty frustrating to find yourself with, a Facebook group doesn't help, a next door group doesn't help because you can't get to anything on your cell phone.
It was frustrating for sure. And so that's why I think we are going to explore this communication piece a little bit more. We're a little disappointed that the radios that we were advised to buy are not the correct ones, but I'm hoping we can find a creative workaround. And I think our team might be engaged to become ham radio operators so that we can try to put them to use if possible, and then maybe get some additional radios. I know I'm willing to invest in my own so that we can make sure that that happens. I think now that this is fresh in everybody's mind is a great opportunity to kind of capitalize on this momentum and to send out that flyer. So I'm happy to absorb that expense. I work with Andy and others to develop some type of, not only like, were you prepared, kind of some quick tips, but then how to get engaged with this group, and then how to get engaged with this committee if they wanted just more additional resources. And then we could do a mail campaign, an online campaign, and then hopefully our team captains will do a door-to-door campaign, even in COVID, so that we can kind of really maximize this energy so that everybody, is ready for the next winter storm. So we're hopeful that we can get a little bit more momentum, but this does take constant work, constant energy focused on it. And sometimes it's just when it's a bright, sunny, beautiful day, it's hard to think about, that a disaster is around the corner.
Thank you. And anyone else who's attending the meeting, do you guys have any comments or questions? I think we're a small enough group. You can just unmute yourself and speak up if you have anything you want to add or ask on this particular topic. Pierre, if you're speaking, you need to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
While you were talking about losing communication, I was thinking, when I was a Boy Scout in Southern California, we had a whole system worked out. That was in the days before all of this technology evolved, where we used runners, or we were set up to use runners that would go from on foot or on bicycle from one part of town to the other to convey messages. And it also struck me, this might sound really crazy, but it probably wouldn't be so crazy if we do suffer something really, really major and it's really dire. But the thought just struck me, and please don't laugh, because it probably won't be a laughing matter in a situation like that. And I thought, pigeons. That's all I got to say. It might sound really crazy, but maybe if certain people are picked out to take care of a pigeon or two and fly through the neighborhood leaving messages, who knows? Just something to think about. Possibility. And that's it.
Anyone else on
I
this?
didn't mean to leave everybody stunned like this.
I'm not a dog owner, but it seems like some people might be able to train their dogs to do something like that.
Well, if a dog can carry the newspaper in from the front door and bring it to you while you're sitting in your slippers, you would think it could be possible. Any other comments or questions on this topic? So I know we'll come
actually I do have time. So you guys talked about the school being there, earthquake safe. We talked about the fire station. What about the city ward on Pilkington? Is there any resource there that we could use?
I know it's a water station for sure. I don't think Pilkington, I don't think that's officially in our neighborhood, to be honest, but it's like just the next block, right? I do know that that is our water source for if we needed to fill up and get fresh water. So maybe that is something we incorporate into our flyer as to how that would be used as a resource for us as well. That's a great point. That's all I'm aware of, unless others know, but we can investigate with the city just to see what other resources might be available there. I believe it's also earthquake resistant or something. And so maybe that's a good meeting point for us, even though it's a little outside of our neighborhood.
Are you saying that they're already equipped with water resources?
Yeah.
For people who don't have any water?
Yeah.
But the question is, if you don't live in that neighborhood, they're going to have muscle at the door to keep you away?
The fire departments run it, right? Or police. I mean, it's definitely part of the city. And I think that's where they'll fill up their tanker trucks, I believe, to get out to the rest of the city. But I do know that we can go and fill up water there as well. But we can, and definitely, Andy, add that to our list to investigate how that's a resource for us since it's so close. Great
That's really-
suggestion.
That's
I
really
agree.
good to know.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
Ann?
When I took CERT training, and if we had a earthquake or something, we were told to do our neighborhood and go to the fire station up on Jean Road. And the field across the street was designated as a triage area so helicopters could come in. And that was a couple of years ago. So I think I'm not sure Cassie knew that or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll see how it would be used in the city. Obviously, that would employ federal resources, right? So, I mean, we'll just have to see how that would all play out.
They said the ham operators were supposed to go there. Then the first CERT person that got there was the team leader to help all the other CERT people that showed up after they had checked their neighborhoods.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Cassie, for joining us, and Andy, thanks for the presentation. We did post I think it's called the Ice Storm Debriefing. That is posted on our website in the meeting materials for anybody who wants to look at that. It's a pretty interesting document. I found it pretty engaging. And we'll come back at the end of the meeting and touch on ideas for the NEP grant cycle. It's not starting this week, according to the city. I believe it's starting later this month, though, and will be about roughly a month to get our application in. So just something to be aware of that we'll want to see what makes the most sense as a neighborhood to request. And Cassie, I know you probably won't be on at the end of the meeting because I know you're on a tight schedule, but Andy will. Well,
I will stick around. I mean, I'll be here listening.
Okay.
I'm just going to continue working
Sure.
for a little bit while y'all just
right.
the trees.
All right. Well, thanks again to both of you. Very important work. So our next agenda item is on to the proposed, the formation of a Bryant Neighborhood Association Urban Forest Committee. And I'll let Ann lead this agenda topic. And I know we have Betsy waiting to present. So Ann, you want to take it from here?
Sure. I'll try to not go into too much detail, but basically, mainly Alan and I felt that there was really a strong need to form an official tree committee for the Bryant Neighborhood Association. And the Oswego Lake Watershed Council is in the process of trying to set up, they're encouraging neighborhood associations to set up an urban forest committee in different neighborhoods. So we decided to do that. And we came up with a mission statement. I think Lake Grove is the other neighborhood association that already has a mission statement. So we sort of based it on theirs, but it's a little bit different. And we also listed all the different, responsibilities and objectives that our committee will have. I'll just read the mission statement so you kind of get the general idea of what the group will be about. Mission statement, recognizing the substantial benefits of trees to our environment in general and our neighborhood specifically. The Bryant Neighborhood Association's Urban Forest Committee acts as a steward of neighborhood trees. Our mission is to protect, advocate for, and foster the preservation, health, and diversity of our urban forest. Oops. Oh, there it is.
There you are.
The main objectives of the committee will be to review the type 2 tree removal applications that the chair, that Alan receives, and that the rest of us will see. They will review those, that the ones that are specific to, that affect our neighborhood. And then we'll decide on whether, you know, we need to appeal or not, or, you know, whether we just need to write some comments. If the permit is for another neighborhood, then we'll also go through some of these steps, and we'll kind of decide whether the application, the tree application warrants an appeal on our behalf or not. We'll also apply the process to tree removal applications that have to do with, you know, big developments that will, like land use projects and things like that. So not just a homeowner that's applying for cutting down trees, but also city projects or developers that are planning on building a big structure on a piece of property, something like that. So anyway, so those are our main objectives. We have several other smaller ones, or broader objectives, I should say, that are also important, because I think in general what they do is the goal is to kind of bring together, to communicate with the neighbors in our area, and also to connect with other neighborhood associations that are also active in protecting trees in their neighborhoods. And the Watershed Council would help us with that. And they recently organized a Zoom meeting for several neighborhood associations that have tree committees. And I thought that was really great, because we were able to come together and talk to each other about various topics. And they'll also support us by giving us information about data that they collect on, like the height of trees and things like that. So the idea is that those last few points about those objectives refer mainly to communicating with neighbors, and also, you know, sharing information with other organizations like the Watershed Council and neighborhood associations. And we also want to be a resource for neighbors if they seek advice regarding, say, you know, if a tree was damaged during a storm, what is it that they need to do? Who do they need to call? So we're kind of hoping that we're kind of going to strive to be sort of a good source of information for people. And that's pretty much it. So tonight, I think the idea is that we're officially forming our Urban Forest Committee, right, Alan?
Correct.
And then we have this wonderful speaker with us, Betsy Wasco, who, she'd like to speak for about 10 minutes about, she needs to unmute herself though. I think she wants to. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Alan, is it okay if Betsy speaks now?
Yeah, I just had one quick question while it was at top of mind. Do you recall approximately how many of the 24 or so associations currently have tree committees?
If I remember right, let's see.
I think it was a majority of them, but I don't remember.
No. It's only about,
Oh.
I want to say half of them have either a formal committee or an informal sort of committee. or a very small one. Like Betsy, I think in your neighborhood associate, you're the only person, right? On your tree committee.
We don't have a tree
You don't
committee.
even have
We
one.
we don't need one. We're that small.
Right. So some of the neighborhood associations are like that. They don't have an official tree committee, but they do are active in protecting trees and in addressing the tree removal applications.
And some have pretty elaborate committees too. I know.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm talking with a couple of associations. So that was all. So Betsy, love to
Okay.
hear from you.
Thank you. My name's Betsy Wasco. I'm chair of the Old Town Neighborhood Association. I've been chair since November 2017. Thank you for having me. I'll try to keep my comments brief, 10 to 15 minutes if you'd indulge me. My purpose is to demystify type 2 tree apps and suggest things you might consider doing as a neighborhood association. I'm going to cover 3 areas. The first are type 2 tree apps, what they are, the nuts and bolts of commenting and appealing. The second are practical considerations. And the third is what you can do as a neighborhood association to help trees. First, type 2 apps. Removing a tree or topping a tree requires city approval. This is done through an application process. Type 2 tree apps are only one of 10 types of tree removal permits in the city. Others include type 1 permits. Those are for small trees, 15-inch diameter at breast height or smaller. And there's hazardous trees, invasive species, dead trees, emergencies, verification permits, topping permits, forest management permits, major minor development permits. Of all of those 10, only major and minor development permits and type 2 apps require notice and an opportunity to be heard. So the type 2 apps are what we see most of, and they involve a request to remove a tree for landscaping or construction purposes. An applicant must file an app. The city will give that person signs to post on the property, and they tag the trees with a yellow ribbon. The home neighborhood association chair is informed. Anyone can offer comments. Comments are submitted by email or online on the city's website. If commenting online, one must create an account and sign in order to post comments. If you email a comment it goes to the planning department, they're placed at the end of the app itself. So comments you will find, if you're interested in reading other people's opinions about a particular app, you need to look, please remember to look in 2 places, at the end of the app as well as at the end of the online comments. The planning department is charged with deciding whether to approve, disapprove, or approve with conditions, any permit. Anyone commenting may appeal. The planning department then issues a tentative decision. Anyone commenting may appeal to the DRC. The DRC then has a hearing. That decision can be appealed further to city council. Appeals fees are to the DRC are typically $200 to $300, but are waived for the home neighborhood association. Back to an overview, after city council's an appeal, their appeals go further to the Land Use Board of Appeals, the state agency, and or the circuit court. Very few cases go up that far. Attorneys are not necessary except if it reaches a level of LUBA or the circuit court. In fact, the system's designed not to have attorneys involved, which is good because it's a cost savings. When and if a neighborhood association appeals to the DRC, it's very important to file with the city documentation as to the board vote, a date or ranges of dates by email, what the vote count was, and the vote needs to be consistent with the neighborhood association bylaws and process. So for example, if the bylaws provide that minority viewpoints must be mentioned in the minutes on any issue that's a subject of a motion, I think it would be good practice to include that in the documentation which is filed. It's just a little paragraph. You know, between this date and that date, we had a board vote. This was the vote, and you know, but it needs to be in writing. It can be emailed to the city, but it can be a basis for dismissal of the appeal if it's not done. I have a form if you need it. Happy to send it to you. The bylaws themselves need not be attached. because the city can take administrative notice of the bylaws because they have to approve them. So that's called administrative notice. The applicant bears the burden of proof to show that he has met the statutory criteria justifying tree removal. That criteria is found in Lake Oswego Code Chapter 55.02.080, and there are 6 criteria. And now I'm going to try to pull that up on my screen. This is my first effort at a screen share. So let me see if I can do this. Share screen and desktop. Oh, this is easier than I thought. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, was nervous about that. Okay. So this is the criteria for issuing type 2 tree permits. And so first of all, there are 6. You see all the 6 here. And the first deals with it. It says that some words here shall demonstrate the following criteria are satisfied, not criterion. It's plural. All of them have to be satisfied. The first thing the applicant needs to show that the tree either outgrew the landscape area or the removal is part of a landscape plan, or to construct development approved or allowed pursuant to the code or other applicable development regulations. The development code, as you know, is Chapter 50 in the Lake Oswego Code. And then it defines landscape plan. Okay. Removal of the tree, number 2, considering mitigation will not have a significant impact on erosion, soil stability, flow of surface waters, protection of adjacent trees or existing windbreaks. The third, and this is the key part here, number 3, and this is as you read it, you'll notice you make a right-hand turn followed by a left-hand turn followed by a right-hand turn, all the while using double negatives. Okay, so bear with me as we go through this one here. Removal of the tree will not have a significant impact on the character or aesthetics of the neighborhood. This standard is met when removal of the tree does not involve a significant tree. What is a significant tree? Significant tree is defined earlier in the statutory scheme in 02020 as a healthy, non-invasive tree over 15 inches diameter at breast height that is considered significant to the neighborhood due to size, species, or distinctive character, or the only remaining tree on the property. B, the removal of the tree will not affect the neighborhood skyline as viewed from public streets within 300 feet of the property. Removal of the tree does not involve removal of a visual screen between a residential and commercial zone, where it does not involve a street tree or a greater than 50% of a stand of trees. Okay, so and then you have the exception. So if you didn't have what I'm about to read, the exceptions, any significant tree would not be removed. Any tree 16-inch diameter at breast height or greater would not be removed. But this is where it gets tricky. Sub 3 is not applicable when a tree is likely to cause damage to a permanent viable existing structure or infrastructure, and it can't be remedied through pruning or maintenance. Or B, alternatives to tree removal have been considered and no reasonable alternative exists to allow the property to be used as permitted in the zone. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. The fourth is you can't remove a tree. You have to demonstrate that the tree removal is not for the sole purpose of providing or enhancing views. It's not contrary to another section of the LO code, and then mitigation is required. Okay, I'm going to stop my screen share now. Okay, all right, so that's the criteria. And when you're providing comments, it's useful or can be useful. It's not necessary, but it's useful to track those criteria. Another source of law relating to type 2 tree apps is the comprehensive plan, both at a state, but especially at the local level. What is the comprehensive plan? In 1973, Governor McCall ushered through Senate Bill 100, the comprehensive plan, which was a set of 19 statewide goals. What McCall recognized was how precious our environment in Oregon is. And he wanted to be sure that, you know, there's horrible pollution of the Willamette at the time, and he wanted to be sure that didn't happen. And he foresaw. The man was a maverick and a visionary. And so he pushed this through. And what it did is it created 19 statewide goals, often referred to by their number. It required local governments to establish their own comprehensive plans. And that includes the county, it includes cities, it includes metro. And then 3, it established an agency to oversee local compliance with the state comprehensive plan. Goal number, the 2 parts of that are, I think, relevant are goal 1, citizen involvement. And now why in a piece of pro-environmental legislation would citizen involvement be goal number 1? And it's because Governor McCall foresaw that development interests might have an outsized influence on our environment, and he knew citizens would be a necessary check and balance against some development interests, irresponsible, I should say, development interests. The portion of Lake Oswego's comprehensive plan which deals with trees is found at Healthy Ecosystems, which was passed by ordinance in January 2016. Healthy Ecosystems positively sings the praises of old trees. It notes a list of wonderful things: sequestering carbon, improving air, soil, and water quality, preventing surface runoff and erosion, providing habitat for wildlife, increasing property values, increasing mental, emotional health, minimizing heat pollution and water, vitalizing the economy, providing privacy and noise buffers, promoting health, decreasing crime, etc. And so that's Lake Oswego's comprehensive plan. In Oregon statute 197.197(2)B requires cities to enact land use regulations to implement their comp plan provisions. So arguably, if the comp plan isn't implemented through the Lake Oswego Code, and that's chapter 50 or 55, the city's doing something wrong. And I think that it may be useful to mention the comp plan as well as other statements of policy, including our designation as Tree City when we offer comments. When offering comments, I know, Anne, you've offered comments before, both, but if you can, the wheel need not be reinvented. If you can use look at other comments, and that kind of can serve as a template sometimes to save time. Next, I want to talk about practical considerations. Many people I've noticed shy away from offering comments because they don't want to offend their neighbors, and it's difficult. And I would hope that, but that seems to be a strong motivating factor, and I understand that. But I think, and so I think sometimes we need to steel ourselves and not make a decision to appeal or to not appeal simply to avoid conflict. Let it be for other reasons. But that's a hard part. But that seems to be the main reason why we're seeing more activity with appeals of these, but we haven't seen a lot in large part for that reason. I think that's just an observation. Okay. The other thing, Forest Heights Neighborhood Association recently had some success resolving part of a dispute regarding a whole bunch of trees they wanted taken out. They saved half of the UFC, the Urban Forest Committee, saved about a half a dozen trees by talking with the developer and the builder. So that was a success. So there's nothing stopping anyone, of course, from trying to resolve issues informally, and that's always a good idea. I think it's worth a try. The other thing is, in terms of practical considerations, understanding, I think it can be useful to understand why we've had so much removal of mature trees in our city. We've had thousands removed just in the past 3 years. So I think we can understand why developers favor tree removal. It's easier to operate heavy machinery on a blank canvas. They can fill more square footage, put more home on a lot, and ultimately it's more profitable. So that, that's their motivation. But why does the city so often allow it, and why have they've granted most of these applications. And I think it's because of three reasons. The first, they're interpreting 50.02080 and especially the exception found at 3B in favor of the development code. Planning issues permits, or they may issue permits concerning the development of a new home. So it would seem incongruent to grant permits, and then after they're granted and the money and work and time is put into that, then they apply for they file a type 2 tree app, which they must do. And so now the city's already granted the permits, and it's incongruous to then say, no, you can't do it because you can't take the tree out. It makes the permitting process an act of futility. So that, and also I don't think the city not wanting to interfere with permitted uses of property is one of the factors, I think. And is that correct? And what can we do about that? What is the solution there? It could be to have the type 2 tree apps addressed before the permitting process would be perhaps a solution, just a thought. So the second reason is cultural. The idea that the environment and its non-human inhabitants are here only for our use, enjoyment, and exploitation as a cultural factor motivating removal of a lot of trees. The third reason, I think, is that developers and builders do actually have an outsized influence in our city government. And that was what Governor McCall warned us about 47 years ago. So I think being vigilant about that is important. Lastly, what can neighborhood associations do? Well, you've got your kudos to you for getting your urban forest committee going. That's great. You can work on that, monitor type 2 apps and file comments as appropriate, work with other urban forest committees, on issues. You might want to, I see you have a nice website, putting information, educational materials on your website. Like, for example, the Lake Oswego Sustainability Network is having a speaker, I think it's on August 8th, a gal named Kristen Olson, OHLSON, I think is how she spells her name. And she's going to talk about soil health. And that's great because it all starts with the soil, right? We need good soil to grow, to have healthy trees. And so putting that on your website to educate people and inform them, that's going to be a Zoom meeting. That's one example. If there are, what I do, we have a little community library in Old Town, and I'll put tree books in there or tree pamphlets. And so people come, they take them, it's one of these libraries where you just take a book and drop some off and stock it up with Richard Powers' The Overstory. You can nominate trees to be heritage trees. And the city's heritage tree program was founded in 1998. There's 38 heritage trees in the city. It's a voluntary program, and it's not the most binding of covenants, but it's great, at least because it reinforces our sense of place and our relationship with trees. People that have heritage tree designations are proud of it. And so that's a good thing. And like people brag about the peg tree in Old Town. Hey, did you know there's a heritage tree? That's our heritage tree. And it's a source of pride for the neighborhood. So see what trees you might be able to nominate as a heritage tree as a thought. And if you're interested, Lake Oswego Code 55.06010 at Secutor is the place to look. That's the authority for heritage trees. So in conclusion, when we see a type 2 tree app, we're really not talking about one tree. We're talking about one tree times 1,000. We're talking about a tragedy of the commons. We're talking about death by 1,000 small cuts. The trees need our voices. Thank you for lending them yours, and thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Betsy. We very much appreciate that. I know this is Ann's topic, but speaking for Ann, we'll just, I think, is there any other discussion? Let's see, I think Andy is still our only other board member on. So I don't know if there's any comments or questions from the board. Hearing none. Any comments? Andy, were you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah,
Just
okay.
Thank you. It was an excellent presentation, and I guess we have a copy. I'm going to have to go over the materials you left. We have a copy of that document you read from, right?
We will. It's the city code, I think, right, Betsy? The
Oh,
link
it
we
is.
sent.
Yes. Yes, I can email it to you if you wish.
Yeah, and now that I have it, I'll post it on the meeting materials of the website too. So comments from anyone else attending the meeting? Comments or questions? From Ed or Sandy, Ann, Bill, Pierre?
Actually, I have one quick question. Does anyone have any observations in light of the recent ice storm and the destruction of trees around the area? Does it bear on this in any way?
I can only say that I'm really sad that my daughter's huge oak tree in her backyard that probably measures 40 inches in diameter is going to get cut down because it has too much damage to it, they say. So.
But do you see any more preventative maintenance that might be overly zealous and go against what we're trying to achieve with the tree committee and preservation in the attempt to try and prevent the kind of destruction from trees that just happened? Is that an issue?
I don't know enough about tree trimming and power lines to have an opinion on this, but an arborist or PGE, I'm sure, you know, they're experts that deal, I think, with arborists who deal with this issue, and that would be, I think they would have a lot more information about what can be done.
Right.
My general understanding from third-party sources is that it's actually PG&E's responsibility to maintain the trees and keep them away from power lines, and they admittedly are not keeping up with the needs. But I've also heard, and Anna has heard, that when they do come in and top trees or cut them back from the power lines, they are not, shall we say, artistic about it all. They're brutal because they don't want to come back and do it for a long time. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. And I think that you know, it's a factor. But you know, when they top a tree, there's not much left. Is my general.
Yeah, and it's not just power lines. I think it's also buildings, homes that are threatened by it.
Yeah. I would expect an influx of applications, and maybe a lot of them are legitimate, of people that now have a tree that where pruning might have saved it before. Now there's, you know, a larger issue.
If we become too zealous about cutting, topping and removing trees, then we're basically exchanging one problem for a bunch of other problems. Also, that's just because trees have, you know, that's the other comment I would have. So
I know as a case study in terms of getting a compromise before an application is ruled on by the city. We had one in our own association that Ann and I both commented on, and when the decision came out, they'd actually pulled back one of the trees that they had originally proposed to cut down, which I think was a 29-inch maple, if I'm remembering right. So a significant tree. And I really think it's because of the comments that we put up in a very nice way to ask the owner to, you know, reconsider. And so that's an example where you can have a positive effect without having to go to war with the city.
I was wondering, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was wondering, tell me, is it Scott who does LO Parks, and he also is very active in the saving trees?
Right.
He's been very helpful in posting attention to certain situations that have come up, just to let people know in the neighborhood that may have not noticed this notices that go up. And I know I've responded to the city with that as about applications for tree removal because of seeing it in like next door neighbor. So that was very helpful. And I don't know if there's like I don't know if there's some other way that some of this information is getting disseminated about knowing when there are properties that have, just so people know that it's time to respond. So they're just more aware. I mean, a lot of people here are kind of already clued in, so they would look into it, but I don't know if everybody in the neighborhood is that alert to this. So just a thought.
Well, I think it's a good point because that happened in my neighborhood. And so one of the things I think the tree committee should consider is where they should automatically post in the Bryant neighborhood section of Nextdoor any tree removal application that comes along to make sure everyone sees it, whether or not we as an association have taken a position on it.
Correct. Yeah, I think that would be great.
Yeah, good feedback.
I would have to tell you though, just this past 48 hours, 2 days ago, probably it was, one of our neighbors put up one of the yellow signs because they're taking down 3 big trees, and the people that were standing in the road going, what are they going to do? And the guy said, just go up and look at Boone's Ferry. Who cares? The city doesn't care. They're all coming down. And that's the way the attitude is right now with my neighbors. So, you know.
I just wanted to chime in and because Andy, if a homeowner sees that its tree is a hazard and they're worried about branches falling into their yard or onto structure, then the tree code is it has this exception built into it where it says that let's see. Well, it essentially says that if the tree is a hazard, then the tree code won't apply. You know, you can just go ahead and do what you need to do. It's very lenient in that way. And I think everybody would understand if you have to cut down a 300-year-old tree because branches are starting to fall on your roof. No one's gonna say no to that. So
the hazard tree applications don't call for public input. So it's just the application is made with the city. So if there's a tree which is was damaged in the ice storm and there's a risk at a large branch or whatever, if it can't be pruned, that's between the city and the owner. That would be not a type 2 tree app, but a hazard app.
Mm-hmm.
Has anybody ever looked into how one could change the tree code itself? Because I mean, I know from Anne what she's doing and all these comments she's making, and the tree code is written in a way that it seems almost impossible to basically stop a tree being cut down, in part because there's so many exceptions, and also because it's written in a way that it's really open to interpretation. And I was wondering whether anybody looked into like how the tree code came into being and who would be somebody we need to influence to change the tree code and make it stricter.
There's been discussion about that, and but I think my take on it is that it's more of a lack of will in terms of interpretation of the tree code, because if I mentioned the comprehensive plan, if the tree code were interpreted through the lens of the comprehensive plan, far fewer trees would go down because it's the way it's interpreted. But if that's what I believe the city's position is, that the development code comes first, and if there's permitting, then you go to that exception in 3B, and it becomes difficult. But having said that, there was a hearing in Evergreen where a tree application, a type 2 tree app, was denied, where the city asked the owner to go back to the drawing board and relocate the garage. So it can be done, and it's a matter of really interpretation, but there's nothing wrong with strengthening the tree code and making some amendments if the council wants to. And there have been the Sustainability Advisory Board. There's, well, I'm not sure if they're working on that, but I've talked to some people, they weren't on the board at the time, who were working with the prior council about making some amendments to the tree code. So it can be done. Sure.
One thing I would like to know is the Development Review Commission. They sometimes approve tree removal and they have not seen the tree or the property. They're just looking at the map that they were given. Is there any way to change it so that those people have to go look at the trees?
That can always be requested. And yes, the city council can always, they can issue an executive order, they can pass a law, but keep in mind, it's, you know, it's a volunteer commission. And so I don't see that happening. But it seems that that's the other thing too, like PowerPoints, if they don't visit the site, and that does happen a lot. And there's really no substitute for visiting the site, but if they don't, there's really not an enforcement mechanism. Can't force them to do that.
Thank you.
Other comments or input on the subject? We do want to pass a motion to formally establish the Urban Forest Committee. So hearing nothing else, I will share my screen, and I have a draft mission statement here somewhere. Bear with me. Very simple. The BNA Board of Directors will establish the Urban Forest Committee of the BNA and adopt the mission statement and objectives as submitted. And I will move the motion. Can I get a second from Andy or Ann?
Yes, I second that.
Okay. So we're both in favor. Andy?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes 3-0.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's really wonderful.
Betsy, thanks for your time tonight. We so much
You-
appreciate the education, and I know we can count on you in the future for advice as we learn how to navigate these tree waters.
Okay, great. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's see. I think we have the agenda up here. So and more specific, that probably won't take as much time as it might have, but we have a specific case where the board of directors made a decision to appeal a tree removal decision. It was not within Bryant neighborhood, but it was on city property, and it was part of this gateway project as you drive into Lake Oswego, coming up 43 that turns into State Street. And because the deadline to appeal was February 19th, we made a quick decision to appeal and then really do our due diligence to figure out, since it is a decision that affects Bryant neighborhood residents because it's on city property and and really is part of the area, as part of the character of the city of Lake Oswego. So we felt it was legitimate for us to be involved, but we wanted to understand more facts to decide whether in fact this appeal should be pursued. I know Betsy had mentioned that the home association can appeal without a fee. However, when we appealed this decision, I believe it's technically in the, is it Forest Hills First Edition? And I'm not quite remembering, but it's not our association, obviously, down at Terwilliger and State Street, but we were not charged a fee. They waived the appeals fee. So I don't know what the exact technical guidelines are there, but it's free for an association and it costs an individual $200 to $300. So Anne has spent a great amount of time really investigating what was behind this decision to remove trees to make way for an new sculpture from the Lake Oswego Arts Council. Is that what they're called? Yeah.
Yes.
And so Anne, why don't you give us a briefing and what your recommendation is? I know we're coming up, we got about 10 minutes to 8 o'clock, but I think we can get through this
Yeah.
easily.
So yeah, I just checked. It is first edition. Forest Hills is the neighborhood association. So the reason we thought we would like to why we wanted to appeal this application was because there 6 trees were, the Arts Council requested that 6 trees be removed at under 820 State Street. 4 of them are maples, 1 is a beech tree, and all 5 of those are street trees. And 1 of them is kind of in a lawn area, and the arborist said it's a sequoia / redwood. I'm still not 100% sure which one it is, but I'm just going to say redwood just to keep things a little simple. so we decided to do some research, and I contacted Sharon Gustafson and also the Arts Council, the executive director of the Arts Council. Her name is Nicole Nathan. I talked to her on the phone, and she, so Alan and I were mainly concerned about that redwood tree. Because the street trees, they said the reasons they want to remove them is because they want to clear the line of sight to this huge statue that they want to place on that lawn. The other reason was that those street trees, those 5 street trees, intersect with the cables, the telephone wires. So those are the 2 reasons why they want to remove those 5 trees along the road. As per tree code, you're not really allowed to cut down type 2 trees for the purpose of clearing, for making a view better, no matter what reason. So the other reason of there in the way of the cables, after the storm, people are kind of afraid of these branches affecting the cables and that kind of thing. And so Nicole told me that they had actually all been topped after the storm. So these trees have been topped. And another concern she had is that they're just going to keep getting bigger, and they'll keep interfering more and more with those cables. So we thought, all right, well, there's probably no chance if we appeal this this application, we're not going to win that battle, because the city is behind this project, this Arts Council project. They're supporting it, and they everybody's aware that these trees that are interfering with these electrical wires and telephone cables and things like that, it's not a good thing. So they believe that eventually those trees are going to get cut down anyway, because they're just in the way. So Al and I said, okay, well, let's kind of focus on that redwood tree and try, maybe we can save that one, because there doesn't seem to be any good reason for why they're removing it. It's not it wouldn't be in the line of sight of the sculpture. There's no cables. There didn't seem to be a reason for removing it. So when I spoke to Nicole, she said, well, the problem with that tree is first of all, it's not in very good condition. It's in fair condition. There are, I think, five or six other redwood trees in that grove that are much better condition. Second, that sculpture is going to be huge. It's about 20 feet tall, 12 feet wide, and it would actually intersect with the branches of the tree. And if they start trimming the tree, the condition of it will just get worse. So they seem to have really done a lot of research on, what the best position for that place for that statue is. They put a lot of time and effort into, picking a spot which would minimize how many trees they would have to cut down. They're also going to plant a lot of mitigation trees, including a redwood, when they're hoping that it'll be in better condition as the current one. They like to replace the street trees with 5 dogwood trees, and in addition to a lot of other plants. So it's Sharon Gustafson, finally, she told us that, well, in general, Betsy agreed that we're probably, if we appeal this, we're probably going to lose. And since the chances are that we're going to probably lose this battle, Sharon Gustafson said, well, it's better probably, well, if we do decide to go through with the appeal, it's going to take such a long time that we'll end up losing, and then the city's going to cut down the trees, and that will already be into nesting season. And it's going to affect all these birds that are building nests in these trees. So we thought, well, maybe we should instead just withdraw the appeal, and so they can cut them down sooner rather than later. So reluctantly, I have to say that we decided to withdraw our appeal. And you know, if I was convinced that they had really made an effort to treat that lot or that property, that park, whatever it's called, as in the best way that they possibly can, and also accommodate that statue for the Gateway project. They'll do a lot of landscaping and things like that. So I'm okay with the decision to withdraw the appeal. And I hope Alan and Andy are too.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple of points. I think this kind of pointed to Betsy's comment about the application, the removal application sort of being the last piece in the process. So this was kind of, the horse kind of left the barn when we looked into it. I mean, the council spent $250,000 on this project already. The statue, the sculpture is 25 feet high. There's been a lot of planning going into this. They'd already made some changes to try to accommodate another association. So although we hadn't really ever seen any specifics about what trees were proposed, I think Anne is correct that even if we got to the city council level, the idea that the city council would say after all of those steps had been taken in the planning process that they weren't going to allow the trees to be removed was pretty unlikely, and might burn capital that we may want with the city council or the DRC for appeals and other situations in the future. So I do think Ann and I, as the only tree committee members at the time, and now we have Pierre also willing to be on the committee, but I think we feel that it's appropriate for the board to pass a motion to withdraw our appeal. Anyone want to comment or have any questions?
You know,
Go ahead.
you can hear me, everybody?
Yeah.
These are like two issues that are very dear to my heart, art and nature. And to have it come down to this and have to decide. But I think, Anne, when you, I guess what I want to say really is, this is like an old story. All these plans are made and all the projects move ahead. And it's like the citizens are the last ones to know about it. And then it's already kind of too late to do anything about it. But I do feel, I'm swayed by the argument that if these birds are roosting and they're all ready and ready to have babies in those nests, then I agree on those grounds to let it go forward now rather than later. That's it.
Thank you, Pierre. And I know, Anne, you spent a lot of time talking with the contact at the Arts Council. Her name is escaping me at the moment.
Nicole?
Nicole Nathan.
Nicole.
Nicole Nathan.
And I think you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but to paraphrase, I think you felt pretty good that, you know, she was pretty sincere about wanting to ensure that future projects really took into account the impact on trees as well. That
Yes.
This wasn't the same story repeated over and over.
Yeah, and I still want to, together with you, Alan, and probably Pierre as well, write a letter to the city council and at the very least, you know, tell them what our concerns were about this project, because, you know, there's going to be more of these Arts Council projects in Lake Oswego. They have a lot of statues. They planned on putting up a lot of statues at different, you know, intersections and in parks and this and that. So I feel like we do need to stay on top of it. You know, just in case something like this happens again. And I think in the letter, we should tell them that we feel that they need to be more transparent with the neighborhoods. You know, because it wasn't until this tree permit came out, this tree permit removal request was posted at the end of February, I think it was, no, the end of January 26th. That was the first time that people were informed that that the redwood tree was going to be removed. I don't think they mentioned that before, that it was even highlighted in one of the videos. They showed it in one of their videos, but they didn't mention that it was going to be cut down. And in the video as well, they didn't show all 5 of the street trees. They just showed this little kind of a vague image of what trees are to be removed, but it was very unclear. And, you know, and that video came out before the tree application. And it's on the website about the Gateway project. But the tree removal request, that was the first time when it was clear that they want to remove 6 trees, you know?
Right.
So I do feel like we need to kind of stay on top of these things, and whenever one of these projects are announced.
Gotcha. So Anne, I put a draft motion up here to withdraw or appeal. Should there be something in the motion related to the Urban Forest Committee drafting a letter as well? Or do you guys just want to do that?
We can just do that.
Oh, okay. All right.
Right? I think we can just do that.
So we have a motion to instruct the chair to cancel the appeal based on new information received by the board since the appeal was filed. Is there any other comment or questions related to this decision? So I will move that motion. Do I have a second? Even if it's
Yes.
second?
Yes.
And Andy, your vote?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So 3-0, the motion passes. And I will write that email at the conclusion of this meeting to just get that cleared up with the city and let them move on. I know we're at our 8 o'clock maximum stop point. We had one item that we want to be aware of, but we're not going to be able to cover it tonight. I think we'll get together and decide the best way to gather input, but this neighborhood enhancement program grant cycle that happens every year that we missed filing for last year, the deadline was moved because of COVID and it just became very confusing, but it's back on its regular schedule. They're going to start accepting applications at the end of March or towards the end of March. They will email the details to me, so I'll be able to distribute them. And so we don't know yet if the criteria are changing, because sometimes they change from year to year. It was previously a maximum of $10,000. So until we see the details, because the email from the city planning department did say they were working up, finalizing the documents before they communicated. So sounds like something's changing. But those grants are for funds to be spent on the city's fiscal year. So money becomes available to us if approved July 1st and has to be spent by June 30th of 2022 is how that works. So I know there was a proposal last year prepared by Deborah Chapman, I believe, who was on the board last year, kind of a welcome packet as a way of engaging new residents in Bryant. And so there's a number of different components. There's the prep LO piece, other things we might do in a time where we're more reliant on electronic communication and emails and video for meetings versus in-person gatherings. So there may be a whole host of things that are worthy of packaging into a single grant proposal. But as I said, it's more of an awareness that the cycle is opening in a few weeks, but I think we'll have to consider separately what we want to file as an association. But I think we'll probably want to give membership an opportunity to input as well, since we have a growing email list of people that like to be informed and engaged with the association. Any other thoughts or comments for tonight? Any other discussion on any previous items? I appreciate everyone hanging in there, including our guest attendees. Thank you for coming and taking an interest in what your board is up to. I think our next regularly scheduled board meeting will now be June, because we try to do them every 3 months. So if we decide we need to have a meeting in the meantime, for any reason, we do use the email notice, obviously, and our various social media to let people know. So anything else anyone wants to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you all for your time and your work, and Betsy for all the great information she had. I'm kind of new to all this, so this was very informative, and I thank you.
Well, great, Sandy. Well, thank you for making the time to sit in with us.
Sure, my pleasure.
All right. Any other comments? Hearing none, we will adjourn this meeting, and everyone have the rest of your evening, and thanks for sticking it out with us.
Thank you, Alan.
All right, I will end the meeting now, and Ann, I'll get with you later on the minutes. I can forward you the stuff that was on my screen.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, everyone. I'm going to end the meeting now.